You just walked past the rubble of a collapsed building. A pile of concrete, bent rebar, shards of broken glass. There was nothing there. But what if one of those piles of debris was watching you? Stay to the end, and you'll understand why the most feared weapon on the modern urban battlefield isn't the gun, it's the simple fact of being invisible. What soldiers fear most on the battlefield is not the enemy charging straight at them. At least that enemy can be seen. And what can be seen can be answered. The real terror is something else. A single shot, from nowhere. The man beside you drops without a sound, and everyone hits the ground on instinct. Then it sinks in, someone is watching us. And we cannot see him. That asymmetry is the very essence of sniping. A sniper's true weapon isn't the rifle, it's the ability to appear as if he doesn't exist. That's why armies gave them names. The Ghost, the White Death, the Shadow in the Ruins. Which raises a question. How can a human being vanish completely, right in front of another human's eyes? To find the answer, we have to go back 100 years to the hunting grounds of Scotland. That grassy, shaggy camouflage suit you've seen in the movies has a name, the Ghillie suit. But the word itself isn't a military term at all. Ghillie was the name for the Scottish gamekeepers who assisted noblemen on their hunts. Their job was to approach deer and game birds without being noticed. Animals are far more alert than people, so these gamekeepers learned to weave grass and scraps of cloth into their clothing, becoming part of the landscape. It was a technique invented to fool animals. The technique crossed over to war in the early 20th century. When a British scouting unit, the Lovett Scouts, took these gamekeepers in as soldiers, the ghillie suit became the origin of military camouflage. The clothing that once fooled beasts now fooled men. And here, one core principle was established. The goal of camouflage isn't to look like a tree. It's to not look like a person. The human eye and brain instantly read vertical lines, symmetry, and smooth outlines as a living thing. So the ghillie suit focuses on one thing: breaking up the human silhouette itself. Disrupt that familiar line of the head and shoulders, and the brain dismisses it as just a bush. And this single principle, break the silhouette, would later evolve into its most terrifying form in the city. There are names you can't leave out when telling the history of concealment. 1939, Finland. As the vast Soviet army invaded snow-covered Finland, a soldier of farming stock appeared, Simo Heihan. A small man, about 152 centimeters tall. Dressed entirely in white and buried in the snow, he held off accounts vary more than 500 enemy soldiers, by some records. The Soviets called him, deadliest, the White Death. The details are what fascinate. He rarely used a telescopic sight to keep the lens from catching sunlight and giving away his position. He even held snow in his mouth, because in the freezing air, the white vapor of his own breath would betray exactly where he was. To disappear, he controlled even his breathing. 3 years later, Stalingrad. This time it wasn't snow, but ruins. In a city that had become a labyrinth of shattered concrete and twisted steel, snipers like Vasily Zaitsev proved something new: that the city is not the worst environment for camouflage, but the best. A ruined building holds endless shadows and countless, suspicious gaps the enemy must check. Finding one man in the rubble was like finding one specific grain in a field of sand. And so the city becomes the most favorable hunting ground for the one who wishes to remain unseen. 80 years later, that hasn't changed. If anything, it's gotten worse. But here's where the story takes a more shocking turn. Throughout the 20th century, camouflage only had to defeat one enemy: the human eye. Match the colors, break the outline, stay still. Then, at a certain point, the rules of the game changed entirely with the arrival of thermal imaging, the infrared sensor. This technology ignores every weakness of the human eye. No matter how perfectly you hide in the brush, the living body is warmer than its surroundings. To a thermal camera, that body heat glows like a lantern in the dark. Color means nothing. Camouflage patterns are useless. If it's warm, it's visible. So in the 21st century, camouflage is no longer a question of inconspicuous color. It's a battle over how to manage heat. Armies develop special materials to trap or disperse body heat, while the other side builds ever more sensitive sensors that see through even those materials, and AI systems that automatically pick out suspicious shapes. This is what modern camouflage really is. Not a matter of a single suit, but an endless arms race between the technology of hiding and the technology of finding. The moment one side discovers a new way to disappear, The other invents a new eye to defeat it. And in this race, there is no permanent winner. And finally, the most fascinating fact of all. A sniper's true power isn't whether he's actually there. It's making the enemy believe he might be somewhere out there. That is everything. The mere rumor that one unseen marksman exists can keep hundreds of troops from raising their heads. A familiar street, an ordinary window, a pile of debris you'd normally ignore, all of it turns into a potential place of death. The enemy ends up fighting not real bullets, but the imagination inside his own head. So what the true ghost sniper targets isn't one man's life. It's the psychology of an entire unit. With the single fact of being invisible, he occupies the enemy's mind. The history of camouflage may, in the end, be a long story about how humans trust what they see. It began with clothing that fooled animals, went on to fool the human eye, and now tries to fool the eye of the machine. And what we find at the end of it all is this: the easiest thing to deceive was always the human mind. What do you think? An enemy you cannot see, or an enemy who might not even be there? Which one frightens you more? Let me know in the comments. If you're curious about the next video, please subscribe and like.